Good morning. You're listening to CFRU 93.3 FM in Guelph, Guelph's community radio station. And this is the show Family Matters. I'm your host, Wendy McDonald. And every Sunday morning from 8 to 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time, we're here to talk about what matters most to families, all the joys and challenges of family life. Parents, children, and other guests share their personal stories and wisdom to inform and inspire us all to support our kids and ourselves. You can email questions about this show to Wendy at compassionatesolutions.ca. You can visit our blog at www.cfrufamily.wordpress.com or visit the CFRU website at www.cfru.ca. And very soon, actually, this blog is going to be moving over to compassionatesolutions.ca, so stay tuned for that switch over, hopefully in the next few days. This morning, I have a special guest. It's Rosemary Walker. Good morning, Rosemary.
Good morning, Wendy.
Great. We have a really neat show today. Rosemary's here to talk a little bit about what it's like to struggle with teens, and to talk a little bit about the parent support group that is here in Guelph, has been going on for quite some time and is available for people who are having a really, really rough time. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the group that's there for people?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I actually became a member of the group. It's called the Association of Parent Support Groups of Ontario, and we have a chapter here in Guelph. I became a member about 7 years ago when I was struggling with one of our teens. We have 5 kids altogether, and this one particular one was trying to find his own way in the world and not taking the route that, of course, we had anticipated. So not necessarily that he was doing the wrong things, but it wasn't what we expected of him. So a lot of people come to the group for various reasons. Could be anything from their kids having a messy room, which drives them to the point of no return, or kids who have been in and out of jail, going through the court system, kids with mental health issues. So it's a whole variety of things that bring us there. And with us in particular, our son was not going to school regularly, was smoking in our basement and having his friends over to party and really not respecting our space. And that was what sort of drove us to the group.
Hmm. And what turned things around?
What turned around was not necessarily the decisions that he was making, but really how we approached what was going on. So it was more about how our perspective changed on things. The focus didn't become about trying to change him. It became about changing how we were reacting to things, and how and also focusing on our relationship with him, instead of, just coming home, reacting to the situation, being, given the tough love, and really putting more of a dent in our relationship than improving it.
So how were you reacting before?
Pretty typical, I think. Come home, yell a lot because nothing had been done, and the place was a mess, and, getting all emotional and dramatic about things, and really taking on the whole situation myself, right, instead of allowing him to be able to resolve some of the things. I, was being typical. And the other thing that typically happens is that people keep a lot of this stuff to themselves. You don't want your mom to know that your child isn't behaving because, apparently they did a good job raising you, and you don't want to feel like a failure. Right. You don't want your friends to know, because anytime you talk to your friends or your cousins, everyone talks about how fabulous their children are and how successful they are and their great marks in school and how they're playing on the rep team and all of those things. And meanwhile, you're struggling inside because like, oh my God, what have I got good to talk about this week, right? that I can compete with that.
Right.
So it's a lot about, a lot of parents struggle with that. A lot of parents that come to our group are very successful professionals. And, there are a lot of teachers. So, here you are, you may be a teacher, and your child isn't going to school. So, you aren't going to go to work and tell your friends about how, little Johnny isn't going to school and can't be bothered with it, doesn't do his homework.
Right.
People are going to think, or in your opinion, people are going to think, oh my God, what is wrong with her as a parent that she can't get her kid to do his homework,
Right, right. So what happens now? Like you're saying his behavior did change or didn't change, or what happened?
Well, yeah, some things change, some things don't. But the things that he chooses to do aren't necessarily my problem. So, he's older now. He's in his 20s, so, we don't have to worry about underage drinking or any of that stuff anymore. But the decisions that he makes are decisions that are important to him, and I don't get involved with them. If he asks me for support or for help with something or for an opinion on something, I'm happy to give it. But basically, he decides what he's going to do with his own life and how he's going to do it. And sometimes it's a good decision, sometimes it's not, just like with us as adults, right? So if he is struggling with something or not doing the right thing and has to learn a lesson from it, then it's his lesson to learn, really. I've already learned a lot of lessons. I like to say to parents, I've been to high school, I don't need to go again. Right? So it's really up to him to be responsible for his own life and to learn from his own experiences. It's not up to me to do that for him.
Okay, now that sounds a bit scary. I mean, for some people, that would be really scary to sort of let go. Because what if his mistake means he's expelled or he fails grades or something like that? And I'm not talking necessarily about your son, but in general now. Right. About what happens then. Because, it's great to say, sure, let them make their own mistakes and experience their consequences.
Ultimately, the only person that you can really control is yourself. You can try and control your child. You can drop them off at the front of the school. They can walk out the back door. You can try and fight with them over doing homework or getting assignments handed in. But ultimately, it's their choice as to whether or not they choose to do that. And there's really two goals that are key to APSGO, and that's to have a positive relationship with your child and to also have peace in your home. If you're spending every day arguing with your child about whether or not they're going to school, if they're getting their homework done, all of those things, you're really just creating a big wedge in your relationship. And probably it may not be so peaceful in your home if you're constantly battling over it. It's hard for parents to accept the fact that their child might fail something. It was very hard for me. My son sort of went back and forth with school, dropped in and out of school and, didn't end up finishing high school. And a lot of these kids don't. It's not necessarily because, what I'm trying to say is that I think it's because they really aren't ready for school. They are, everybody's different. And there are a lot of kids out there who are maybe a little more artistic or just have a different path, a different way of looking at things. It doesn't necessarily mean that they'll never go back and finish school or that they will not succeed in life because they didn't finish high school. Everybody learns differently from different experiences in life. And sitting in a classroom is not necessarily the best way for everyone to learn. So it was really hard for me because, I had the expectation that, hey, all of our kids will go to university or whatever, and they haven't. Yeah. And that's okay because they're doing what they want to do and they're happy doing it. But yeah, it is tough to accept that they may not be this person that you expect them to be. And I think that's one of the key things that we talk about is to not have expectations, because when you have expectations, then you're typically disappointed if things don't come out exactly the way that you wanted it. And just because it's the way that you wanted it doesn't mean it's the right way.
Wow. If you're just tuning in, folks, I'm having an engaging conversation. I don't know if anyone else is listening, but I'm having an engaging conversation about teens and releasing some expectations. The show is actually about when we're struggling with our teenage children. And I have Rosemary Walker here in the studio. You're listening to Family Matters, and I'm your host, Wendy McDonald, on CFRU 93.3 FM. And I'm struck by this idea. Okay, so we can't change anybody else's behavior. And I get that we can change our perception of their behavior and do that. That sounds like a really hard thing to do. To get to a place where we have all these expectations. They're going to university, they should be going to school, and here my kid's dropping out or maybe doing drugs in my basement and that kind of stuff. How does one get from unstuck from some expectations and maybe even some safety issues to being able to open our hearts to be able to be with our kids and focus on the two things that you mentioned that the Association of Parent Support Groups of Ontario focuses on: peace in the home and a positive relationship?
I would say that how we get there really is that through the steps that we take at APSGO, you start to see more of a positive relationship, which is really key. One of the things that we do, for example, is that we talk about not asking kids questions. Because when you ask a lot of questions, so, Jane comes home and you ask her, okay, what, how was school today? What did you do? Do you have any homework? What are you working on this? How was so-and-so? You start asking 50 questions. Well, they could easily answer yes to, did you go to school? Yeah. And meanwhile, they didn't go to school, so you'll be annoyed that they lied to you. Or they might say no, and then you'll be disappointed that they didn't go to school. And it pretty much just sets you up for some sort of challenge with them. So we advise people not to ask questions. And we also give them advice on what to do when they're not asking questions.
Yeah.
Because we've spent, everyone pretty much has the same routine, right? You get home, you sit down and have the kids for dinner, you're having dinner, and it becomes the Spanish Inquisition, right? 50 questions, rushing around the table, trying to ask all the kids the questions to make sure you get all the information for the day. Because God forbid that you didn't know, how they did on their test or something. What would happen then? So what we coach parents to do is to really find other things to talk about. Talk about yourself. Now, if you were a teenager and your parents just came home every day and asked you questions, talked about how miserable the world was and politics and whatever else, would you really want to become an adult? Would you really want to step up to the plate and grow up? You're thinking, wow, this is what it's like to be a parent. I think I'll be a kid forever. Right? So you really need to make being an adult and being a parent maybe a little more appealing. Right? So you come home and you talk a bit about, what was happening at work today, something interesting you worked on, or something that, you were talking to grandma and this is what she's up to, or a book you're reading, or a movie you're thinking about going to see, or something you saw on YouTube, whatever it is. Just things about yourself, maybe a hobby that you're into. A lot of parents are so focused on raising their kids that becomes their entire life. So they spend, they go to work, they come home, and the whole evening is about taking care of the kids and feeding them and getting them to sports and doing all their things on the weekends as well. And they don't take any time for themselves. So that's one of the things that we do try and reinforce a lot, is to really think about, hey, this is my opportunity to be me. I'm so focused on my child, and my child couldn't give a darn what I'm doing or what I'm up to, because they're just focused on themselves and their social life and their friends and everything else, right? And here I am devoting all of my time to them, when really maybe I need to take some time to myself and try and make myself healthier so that my child can see that, hey, it wouldn't be so bad to be an adult maybe.
Oh, that's neat. That reminds me of a time I was watching Michael Rice, who is a teacher. I believe he's in Caledon, and he sometimes does speaking engagements here in Guelph. And he was speaking somewhere, and I was watching him, and he says, if you catch yourself doting on your children, just that your focus is more on them than on yourself, he says you need a hobby.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what a great example to set for them.
Yeah.
That you take up painting or I don't know, anything, photography, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You take up a hobby and you have something that interests you in life. Here are the kind of things that we want our kids to see as good, good things to do when you're an adult. Maybe a little volunteer work or, whatever it is that you're doing that sets a really good example for them.
Neat. And actually, that just for folks just tuning in, you're listening to Family Matters on CFRU 93.3 FM. I'm your host, Wendy McDonald, and I'm speaking with Rosemary Walker from the Association of Parent Support Groups of Ontario. And if you're just listening in on how important it is for parents to have a hobby, we did a couple of shows, actually a series of shows, about a month worth of shows back in the spring, all about living our dreams and having hobbies and doing what brings us joy, so that we actually can have some interesting things to talk about with our kids, and also model, like you said, how exciting it is to be an adult. So we don't lose all of that. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Can you tell us a little bit about when the group meets for folks that need this kind of support, that would like to meet other parents who are struggling, who have kids in jail, who are just really fed up and triggered by rolling eyes and tuning out and messy bedroom and coming home, the house is totaled, the car is gone. It also, those are kind of more of the overt actions. I also want to talk a little bit about sometimes we have kids who are depressed, who are anxious. Those are more of the invisible type of struggles that I think we have, and I don't want to underestimate how challenging that is either. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but first I wanted to ask you a little bit about when the group meets, so that if people are looking for some support, the contact number, that kind of stuff.
Okay, yes, the group meets on Wednesday evenings at 7:30. We're done sometime between 9 and 9:30, depending on the night and how many people are working that night. Mm-hmm. The structure of the group is that we typically have anywhere between 20 and 40 parents at the group. We really try and encourage, if it is a two-parent family, to have both parents come out. We've had situations where we actually have both parents come out and they're no longer together, but they're still parenting, obviously, together. We've had grandparents come out or guardians, whole variety. And I should also say that not only for just specifically the teenage years, but we have parents come out for kids as young as probably 10 or 11. Who are really already starting to get into some not so nice habits. Up to, we have parents right now whose child is, I think he's 38.
Oh,
okay.
Okay.
So, being an enabling parent when your child is 10 and 38 is really all the same thing. It's all the same relationship issues and the same habits that they've just lasted a lot longer.
Good to know.
So it's really a wide range of people. So the structure of the meeting, what happens is when we first come in, we socialize a bit and sit down. I'm the coordinator of the group, and there are several coaches. So we'll introduce the group, get started, talk a bit about confidentiality, which is really key. So we do that at the beginning and the end of the group. Remind everyone that everything that is said, either in a large group, small groups, even any phone conversations you might have with anyone, is kept confidential. Because a lot of the kids tend to know each other. Right. They socialize in the same circles. So we don't want any information getting back through anyone. Then we'll actually go around in a circle, and everyone will have a minute or two to talk a bit about their child. And we try and focus that on something that positive that's happened this week, maybe something that we're working on from the previous week, because we do actually assign homework. So there is quite a bit of structure to the meeting. So once people have gone around, at the end of their little intro, they'll let us know if they're working or not. Working means that they want some help with something this week. If they're not working, they just sit in with another group and maybe provide additional support for them as well.
Okay. Or just watch even.
Yeah, or
like
just
if
even
people,
watch.
If people
just
don't
get
want to do
things
anything.
reinforced.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, it just gets reinforced in their mind.
That might be good for someone who's really shy and says, I don't want to do anything.
Well, there's a bit of a catch to that because you have to work the first couple of months anyhow.
Okay.
It usually ends up being the first few months. We don't really give people a choice because you really want to reinforce all of the things that we're talking about. And even if it's people might think, oh, everything's going really good and I don't need to work this week. There's always some little thing, or maybe I had a conversation with my daughter that I wasn't sure went so well this week. And, how can I have said that differently? What could I have done differently so I got a better outcome? How can I have approached this differently?
Okay, now that sounds a little scary for someone just coming in, and I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
so what's the typical reaction of a new parent that's coming into a group like that?
Well, what typically happens is once everyone's gone around the circle the first time, they don't talk the first session. What they do is they'll listen. And then they'll go into an orientation group with one of the coaches who will explain to them how the group works.
Oh, okay.
So they don't have to do anything really the first night. And what typically happens is that you hear everyone in the circle tell their story and you go, oh my God, that is so my kid. One of those kids out there that they're talking about will be totally your child or partially your child or something that you can relate to. And you'll be able to see how people are dealing with that. So it'll be different levels of people. I've been involved in the group for 7 years, not because of my struggling child, but because I want to give back and be able to help others with it. But there will be people that are relatively new, or maybe it's just been a few weeks they've been there, and they're starting to see positive results. So it's really good. And the parents are usually very encouraged by the time they hear everybody's check-in. They want to get started right away, typically.
Well, that's true, yeah, because there's such an urgency, too, to make the situation at home much more better, because it's pretty unbearable.
Well, it is, and the thing that we remind people of is that it probably didn't happen overnight, getting into that situation. It's been some parents start with, from the day my child was born, we struggled, and others are, since they got into grade 9 or whatever it is, right? So we remind people that, hey, you know what? This didn't happen overnight. It's going to take some time to change how things are happening, It's more like taking, vitamin C over the long term versus, popping some drugs.
So if people want to get a hold of this group, it's Monday nights from 7:30 to 9 o'clock at the Knox Presbyterian Church at Quebec and Baker Streets in downtown Guelph.
Yes. And there's a contact, actually, that you would call to let them know that you're coming to the meeting. And the number is at 519-763-6186. And that is Neil. And so if you give Neil a call just to let him know that you're interested in coming out, or if you have any more questions about the group, he's sort of an intake guy, and he'd be happy to tell you a bit about it. Okay. More details on where the meeting's at, that type of thing. And then you're welcome to show up any Monday.
Great. So it runs every Monday.
Yes.
And I've seen this meeting advertised in the Tribune.
Yes, it is.
As well.
Yeah, so we put it in there as well. One of the key things to success, really, with the group is coming to the meetings regularly. There are occasionally parents who only come when there's a crisis. And if you're just reacting to the crises, then you're not really changing the behavior or how you're handling things at home. Yeah. So it's really key to come regularly. And it's pretty handy that it's a Monday night. It's in the center of town. You can take the bus if you need to. Yeah. So we got parents that do that. And we also, just for people's information, there's a wide variety of people that are coming to the group. Yeah. We've got everything from lawyers, teachers, to people who are on family assistance, people who have been referred through Family and Children's Services. So there's a very wide demographic, which is always good for people as well to see that, hey, this doesn't only happen to a certain type of parent or a certain type of family.
Oh, I'm so glad for that. Give us a bit of hope. So how is your relationship with your son now?
It's actually great. Okay. He doesn't live at home anymore. He is in his 20s. But we get together regularly. He's coming over for a Sunday dinner tonight. We usually get together one night a week for dinner as well. I help him out with groceries, so we do that. But he's a really good budgeter when it comes to that. He is very respectful. I enjoy his company. When we go to dinner, it's like going to dinner with a friend. I look forward to it. He tells me about what's happening in his life, and I tell him about what's happening in mine, and it's good. And things are good at home too. Like when he comes, people are happy to see him, and he gets along relatively well with his siblings and all of that. So, and he's very. He's always been very respectful of grandparents and stuff, so he loves to get together with them and spend time with them. So it's been really good. He's actually writing his high school equivalency exam shortly, so hopefully he's talking about going to college. Of course, I have no expectations. Right. If that's what he chooses to do, that's great. I'll support him, whatever it is that he decides is right for him.
Yeah, that's really great. So it gets me thinking, gosh, why is it we put so much pressure on our kids to do certain things in a certain timeline, in a certain way, and how that is so detrimental to our relationships?
Yeah, I think it's really that we focus too much on other people's perspective on things and what other people think. And it's really, it's a hard thing to, go to your parents or someone and say, you know what, I'm struggling with this. I can't. I'm trying to make my kid do all these things that you made me do, and they're not they're not doing them.
Right.
And it's hard to admit that you need help. And people only really will come to a support group when they're just like at their wits' end, and they finally reach the point where, oh my God, I need help with this. And it could be honestly anything from, not picking up after themselves or not helping with the dishes. To some people, that's as much of a struggle or a crisis for them as it is for parents who, maybe have a child who's expecting or something to that degree, right? Yeah. We all have different expectations, different tolerance levels, and we like to, at the group, really make sure that we're treating all of those people equally, because really, just because, a messy room may not seem important to one parent, it's, a disaster to another.
Yeah. Thank you very much for saying that, because I imagine there's some folks listening in that come from a wide variety of backgrounds, different situations, and to really listen to our own selves and how we're reacting to it. And if it's something we need help with, then reach out for help. This is great. So if you're tuning in, you're listening to Family Matters on CFRU 93.3 FM. I have Rosemary Walker here from the Association of Parent Support Groups of Ontario, and they have a website, www.apsgo.ca, the Association of Parent Support Groups of Ontario, and our Guelph contact number is 519-763-6186, and the group meets on Monday nights downtown from 7:30 to about 9 o'clock, depending on how much people want to socialize. And we've been talking a lot about growing up with teenagers. And I want to get back to the question I was asking you about anxiety, depression, those sorts of struggles that we have that may be a bit more invisible. Your child comes home from school, seems pretty happy at school, comes home, and they're crying for hours on end at the end of school. Can you talk a little bit about those particular issues? Are they different from some of the acting out, the drugs, the messy room, and that kind of stuff? Or
well, in some ways they're different, but they're also how we approach the parenting part is really the same.
Okay.
So there's sort of a few key principles, I guess you can call them, that we use, and they're all directed to building the relationship. So, whether your child is smoking drugs or selling drugs or coming home and being anxious in the evening, ultimately how you're going to be able to help your child is by having a better relationship with them. So if your child is coming home and they're in their bedroom crying and you keep knocking at the door going, are you sure you're okay? You know, do you need some help? You know, what happened today? You know, something must be wrong. and, you know, going at them, asking all of these questions. That may not be helpful to the relationship, but finding a way that you can make them feel comfortable coming to you, I guess, is the key. Okay. You want your kids to know that they can come and tell you anything and that you won't react to it. You won't react negatively. Right?
I was just going to say, because we're going to react, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, you try not to react negatively or positively, because the same thing happens when your child comes home and they did really well on a test or something really good happened. They come home and good, you know, I got 95 on this test. And if you're going, oh my God, that's amazing. Well, I should buy you that iPod or whatever, you know what it is. It's just like when the kids were little and you had them put the gold stars on the board.
Yes.
When they do that, who are they pleasing really? They're doing that to please their parents, so that their parents will believe that, oh, you know, I did a good job. So that's why they rush home and tell you they got a good mark, because they want you to think that they're great. Right. And no matter what they do, you'll think that they're great. They don't need the gold star. They don't need the 95 because they're your kids, right? But they feel the need to please their parents, right? So if they're doing something that's not necessarily pleasing you, then they're more worried about your reaction. What we really want to teach kids as parents is how to feel good about something themselves, so that they realize that, hey, you know what, getting a good mark makes me feel really good. It makes me want to work harder maybe next time at another course, or, you know, it makes me want to succeed at something. And so I'm doing it because I feel good and not because I want mom and dad to feel good about it.
Okay.
So if your child does come home and says they got 95, it's like, wow, you know, how does that make you feel? Or, oh, what do you think you did differently? You know, something like that gets them to think about how they got that 95, you know, what the result of it is. And, you know, what do you think that'll mean for, you know, the next time, or whatever it is. Just that type of question where it really gets them thinking about, oh, yeah, so it must have been a reason why I got this mark, and maybe I need to think about how I can apply that again.
And I'm guessing if my child is telling me about this mark, there's something interesting about that mark. So we want them to just talk about what's interesting about that. Is it higher? Is it lower? Are you disappointed? Are you glad? Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. How they're feeling about it.
Right. Okay.
It's just like they, you know, they're anxious about something, or they're stressed about something. You want them to be able to come to you and talk to you without you saying, well, you know, or say they come home and their friend's pregnant or something. So they're stressed about the situation and, oh my God, I don't know what she's going to do. You judging that or reacting to it isn't going to help the situation. But maybe sitting down and saying, well, you know, let's have a cup of tea. And, you know, so, you know, why do you think this situation happened, or what, you know, I'm listening. You know, really let them know that you're listening to what they're saying, or, you know, tell me more, or, you know, what do you think is the best approach? Just have a conversation about it with them, instead of giving them advice about it or telling them what should have happened, shouldn't have happened, or why this happened, or, you know, really getting them to think about, okay, how did they get into this situation, and what kind of things can they do to change it.
Okay. So I get that we're just going to be with them wherever they are and whatever they bring to us, and that's cool. But what if the parent then says, you know, I'm exhausted. I've listened to my child cry day in and day out, several times, you know, a week, this week, last week, and the week before. I mean, this isn't something that's, you know, just an overnight thing. Gosh, what can a support group, or what kind of support can we offer in that for someone like that?
One of the things that we can suggest to parents is that maybe they sit down and have a conversation with their child. So at a time when they're not anxious or crying in the room, just any other time of day, hey, you know, can we sit down and have a cup of tea, or, you know, let's go out for coffee or something, and just say to them, you know, I've really noticed that your anxiety level's up a lot lately. And I'm sure that you have a lot of things going on because you have school and dance and this new boyfriend and you know, World of Warcraft or whatever video game you're involved in.
Right.
So there's a lot going on. And, it's not like the olden days where there wasn't as much going on. There's a lot of stimulus going on, right? So remind them that you can totally understand why they'd be feeling anxious, because there are a lot of decisions to make, lots of things to do. And that you've noticed that, and that, ask if there's any way that you'd be able to help with that. Is there anything I can be doing differently, maybe to help you? Or, what would you like me to do? I don't want to be knocking on your door when you're in your room crying and, offering to help because you're distressed at that time. So if this does happen again tomorrow or whatever, what would you like me to do? How can I help you? What can I do to help you?
Oh, that's great. And then also take care of ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Do what we can do, and then...
Yeah, and really think about, do everything that you can to help a parent. And really, with that conversation, you would really just have that conversation once.
Okay.
You don't need to, we tend to tell our kids the same thing over and over and over again. And they do actually hear you the first time you tell them, as long as you have their focused attention when you're telling them, right? Not when they're watching TV or something. They do tend to hear it. And so once you've made that point, they know that you're available. So you don't have to have a conversation on a daily basis or weekly basis to remind them that, hey, remember, I'm here for support if you want to ask me something. Because they know that you are. And really just being there as a person that, when they come home from school or walk in and if you're not asking all of the questions, they know that, hey, they can come into the kitchen while you're making dinner and they can sit at the table and ask you something or start talking to you. And you won't overreact to it. You won't give them a lecture. You won't ask them 20 questions about it. And it really makes it a lot easier for them to talk to you if they know that they can come anytime and not be judged or yelled at.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. For folks just tuning in, you're listening to CFRU 93.3 FM in Guelph, and this is the show Family Matters, and I'm your host, Wendy McDonald, and I'm talking to Rosemary Walker about growing up with teens and some of the struggles and overcoming the challenges of releasing our expectations, really being with our children, and wherever they are, however they express it. It's really challenging. And the aims of the Association of Parent Support Groups of Ontario, their website is APSGO.ca, are to have peace in the home and a positive relationship with our family members. And the group meets Monday nights from 7:30 to 9 at the Knox Presbyterian Church downtown at Quebec and Baker. And you can reach them at 519-763-6186 if you want to get involved and get some support. So we talked a little bit about what is involved in offering that kind of support. There's an orientation, of course, to the group, and then some homework, as you mentioned. Each parent is asked to introduce their child to the group, and they're asked to make a list of the things that are frustrating, condense that list to about 5 and share 5. Is that right?
So what'll happen is at your orientation, the coach is working with you. We'll give you a little bit of homework for the first night, and as you said, one of the things is to sort of make a list about the things that frustrate you about your child. And usually we can come up with a few of those. And if we mark it down to, I'm sure you can come up with the same list for your husband too. Right? as soon as you have the list, you sort of take it down to the top 5 or the most frustrating things and bring those with you to the next session, and also bring a list of how you would like things to be. What are sort of the top 5 ways of what you would like, how you would like things to be, with your child at home.
Okay.
So then when you come back for the next session, we would really work with you on and sort of what those key things are that you're looking for and where you would like to be with a relationship. It's, all of those 5 annoying things usually come down to things that are anti-relationship, really, and anti-peace in your home, right? So ultimately, the things that people want tend to go towards that, right? Because as parents, really, I mean, what you really want is this relationship, because you also start to see, your child's a teenager and you're thinking, oh my God, they're leaving soon, they might be going away to school, or, they'll go off and live on their own, and if I'm still yelling at them every day, and if they're still ignoring me every day, what's going to happen? Will I still have, will I be in an old age home and my kids will never come to visit me?
Yeah.
So here's your key opportunity, really, to build on that relationship. So you would sit down with a coach in the second half of the meeting. What you do is we break into smaller groups. So there may be a couple of people working in that group or one person working in that group, and there's usually 2 coaches per group. Mm-hmm. So you're going to get different perspectives as well, right? Some of us may be a little more empathetic than others or whatever as coaches, right? So it's good to have a couple of different styles. And each week you would work with different coaches. So you're also getting a slightly different perspective or different experiences from people who would share their experiences with you and ideas. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that I think is really helpful about the group, is that then that it's not just one person telling you what to do. It's very different than sort of going to a therapist or something per se, right? Because you're getting a different perspective every time you go in.
Right. So you can sort of pick and choose your flavors and what's really going to work for your family.
Yeah, and so what happens is that person will work with you, maybe give you some suggestions for the week. I like to specifically have people write down exactly word for word some things they can say and kind of try and memorize those, because a lot of times you're in a panic or it's one of those moments and you're thinking, oh my God, I don't know what to say. Well, if you've written down on a list possible things to say or to talk about with your child, it's going to be a lot easier. Mm-hmm. So we'll give people suggestions and things to work on for the week with their child. And then when they come back the following week, we usually start off with, okay, well, what were you working on this week? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, I was working on not asking any questions, and that was really hard. What can I do differently to try and be able to do that? So then we would kind of, get into the next step and give them some ideas on that.
Great. Actually, can you speak just a moment about some of the questions that you do cover in each group, kind of to like as people are working on different things, the stuff that comes up? Can you discuss that?
Well, yeah. One of the things that, when people first come and tell us about their list of how they would like things to be, we like to get them to think about, okay, well, what have they been doing so far to get that? You want your child to clean up, or you want them to be going to school, or the different things that your expectations that you have, and you want respect. What kind of things have you been doing? And then sort of what results are you getting? So that people can really think about, okay, is what I'm doing working or not? Pay attention to what's going on and think about, is this a result that I'm really looking for? And then we would talk about whether or not they're willing to try something a little bit different. Ask them sort of what they're hoping to get out of the group. So we really want to make sure that when we're working with parents that we're heading in a direction that's right for them, that's going to work for them. We would never ask anyone to do any homework or to have an assignment they weren't comfortable with. So usually when we've sort of, we're wrapping up our session with them, we'll ask, okay, what things do you have on your list? And are you comfortable going through with those? People will sometimes say, well, I'm going to have to think about it. This week I'm going to think about it, and then maybe next week we can talk about it some more.
Yeah.
And other people are like, oh, yeah, when I go home, I definitely want to do this, or I could do that. They're confident that they can, but not everyone is, right?
Right. Just last weekend, I heard, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Weight Watchers, and they have a saying that goes, the thing that you will do, like the most successful strategy is the thing that you will do. Mm-hmm. And there's probably a gazillion things that any parent has a choice about doing, but the only thing that's going to work is the thing that we actually do. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like your group supports people in figuring out, based on their resources, wherever they're at, this is the thing that I can do. Let's try that out, and then come back to the group and evaluate whether or not that thing worked out the way that they were hoping to, and they get to try out something else.
And you know what, I read in a book once, and I can't remember what book it was, but it said that 95% of what we do as a parent will think we did wrong. And it's so true, because, we're always beating ourselves up for what we do and what we say to our kids. And you're like, oh, God, I shouldn't have said that, or why did I react that way? Or, when we see their reaction to what we've said, we go, oh, man, what am I thinking? So it's really important not to beat yourself up and not to be so hard on yourself. Because really I remember my mom saying, I did the best I could with what I knew as a parent, right? And it is so true. That's exactly what it is. Right. It's all of the experience and all of the sharing that you've received from your parents, your friends, your family. That's how you parent kids. There isn't really, unfortunately, a set course. There should be. But I would say that APSGO is probably the closest thing to that.
Yeah. Well, the beauty that I see is that you have the experience of people at various stages in their own development, in the relationship, but also their own personal development. So you get a chance to see people who are just beginning out and feeling really miserable and desperate, heartbroken, and at that place of crisis. Where people are going, okay, you know what, this has gotten so unbearable, I got to get some help, to someone like you who is moved past that place, can see that, okay, there's another way. I could see this differently.
Yeah, you know what? There are a lot of families that come through the group. I would say, like in the last 7 years that I've been there's probably 400 or 500 families that I've worked with.
Yeah,
and there's bound to be someone who's very much like the person who's coming in tonight, right? It's funny. I always like to work with the new people coming in, and some people are like, oh no, they're a little panicked about it. But I love working with the new people. It's like, oh, here's a brand new one. Oh, this reminds me of so and so from 3 years ago, and how did we deal with that, and what was the situation, and what can we do? And I tell you, it's the most rewarding volunteer gig, because you always feel great when you leave, because when parents leave, they've got that little glimmer of hope, right? That things might be better this week than they were the previous week, and that really makes you feel good that you're able to help them out.
That's so cool. And we've only got probably about another 5 more minutes, and this is the show Family Matters, and we'll be talking about teens. I'm your host, Wendy McDonald, and I'm speaking with Rosemary Walker. And can you give us maybe a couple of key ways that people can shift their own focus from their own anxiety, their own worry, their own self-doubt, to curiosity about what's happening for their child? What are some things that you've noticed that people can do?
Well, I would say that really focusing on the little things. So not. I guess there are certain things that you can do to try and build a relationship. And I would say, like, one thing that I think is really important is whenever you do have a conversation with your child, or really with anyone, because a lot of these things apply to all relationships.
Oh, I was just thinking that.
One of the things that I always like to do is to finish off the conversation with when you're going to connect again. So, we'll see you next Sunday for dinner, or, call me this week and we'll meet for coffee and go for groceries or whatever it is. So that there's always a connection or an anticipated future meeting time. So that's kind of a neat little tidbit. I think that it always makes you feel good if someone says, well, I'm going to call you Tuesday, and try and make it as specific as possible, right? Because it makes you still connected even after you leave, and what you really want is a connection.
Oh, I like that. We've done some shows on attachment, and it's like bridging the gap between this conversation and the next, and we can hold each other in our hearts between the two times. That's cool.
Or even if your child's struggling about something, they're anxious, you've had a conversation, and you can say at the end of it, can we connect tomorrow about this again, or when can we talk about it again? It's comfortable for you, right? So Neat. That they know that, hey, you're there for them.
I imagine that also reduces some anxiety too. About Mom really is serious about this. I'm important.
Exactly, and really the using the words I'm listening, and I'm here to what else can you tell me about it, or really make it really use those listening skills.
Okay, and one other thing that perhaps you said, it's focusing on the little things. So that's one little thing to focus on, bridging the gap between this conversation and the next. Is there anything else you've noticed to kind of shift from focus on ourselves and the anxiety and the worry, the self-doubt we might be feeling as a parent, to really being curious about what's going on?
I think really looking at our kids as emerging adults, and really trying to see them differently, not seeing them as our little kid anymore. Somebody that we can control and get to do certain things. Really trying to respect that they're just trying to grow up. They're trying to be independent. They're really trying to find themselves. And a lot of times our kids who bring us to the group are really very independent kids who are, making a lot of decisions. And it's scary to us because they're making a lot of decisions. But we have to really change our perspective on, hey, here's a kid who is willing to go out there and make these decisions or do these things on their own. So really they're fighting for their independence and trying to grow up. And sometimes we just have to sit back and go, okay, why am I trying to stop them from doing that?
Right.
It's really not a bad thing that they're trying to figure out things in life.
Right. So seeing the value of a particular quality, that's really neat.
Really looking at our, one of the other things that's key is looking at our kids' positive character traits versus our expectations of them. So, and pointing that out to them as well, wow, you are a really loyal friend to Tim. That's a great quality. So
why would you point it out? Because I'm concerned about sort of like rewarding in the same way we talked about earlier today, that if we reward them, give them like the gold star or whatever, then they're not really doing it for their own intrinsic motivation.
Well, they are, because you're pointing out a character trait versus an accomplishment. Right?
Okay.
So being loyal to Tim is a positive character trait. Or, you're very caring with Grandma. Not everyone has as much patience with Grandma as you do. That kind of thing, right?
So it's kind of expressing our appreciation. It's like, wow, I'm really enjoying watching this happen.
You show a lot of patience with your little cousins or whatever it is, right?
Okay.
It shows, so, those are positive traits. You're caring, you're patient, you're loyal. So, sometimes you can go online and look up positive traits or something, character traits, and see if you can find a few that apply to your child, right? So then you can reinforce those with them. Hey, these are some good positive things that they're doing.
Right. And what we might call stubborn could be very persistent later, like 20 years down the road or 10 years down the road.
You're really persistent.
Right. You really stick to those things when they're really important to you.
Exactly.
That's awesome. That's great. Thank you so much, Rosemary, for coming in and sharing your wisdom with us. And I really do hope people contact the Guelph group of the Association of Parent Support Groups of Ontario. Their number again, do you want to read that out?
Yeah, it's 519-763-6186. And Neil is the contact, and he'd be happy to give you any other information that you might require and hook you up coming to a meeting.
Great. I'm so grateful that this support is out there every Monday night.
Yes, every Monday except Christmas Day.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Good that we mentioned that.
Because the Christmas holidays are always a struggle, too.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes, I think Christmas is on a Saturday, though.
Yeah. Usually around the holidays, we always have people showing up on Mondays.
Yes, so there you go. That's really great to know. And for folks, you've just been listening to Family Matters on CFRU 93.3 FM in Guelph.